At my wedding reception, my mother-in-law publicly shamed me for wearing a cheap dress. I tried to laugh it off until she pulled out the receipt. Then my sister-in-law whispered, "She swapped it." Mark and I had been together for over 2 years when we decided to get married. We both came from different backgrounds. His family was wealthy and very opinionated, while I grew up in a modest, middle-class household. From the very start, I knew my mother-in-law, Jacqueline, wasn't going to be the easiest person to deal with. She had this calm, controlling demeanor about her that never quite sat well with me. I've always been the type of person who values simplicity. I didn't need anything extravagant for my wedding, just something beautiful that fit me. My dress was simple, a delicate lace design with satin that shimmered under light. It wasn't designer, it wasn't overly expensive, but it made me feel like a bride. I've had my fair share of interactions with Jacqueline, and they were always polite, but there was an underlying tension. She didn't exactly approve of me, at least not in the way she should have, and I always felt like I was under a microscope when I was around her. But I pushed those thoughts aside, especially when it came to planning the wedding. I didn't want her negativity to ruin what was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. Fast forward to the wedding day. Everything was perfect: the weather, the venue, the guests. I was nervous, of course, but excited. I couldn't wait to marry Mark. But as soon as the reception started, I could feel something in the air shift. The guests were having fun, but there was an odd undercurrent I couldn't ignore. As I walked into the reception hall, I immediately noticed that Jacqueline had a peculiar smile on her face, one that didn't reach her eyes. She gave me a hug, but there was a stiffness to it, as though she was trying to maintain some distance. I brushed it off. After all, she was probably just adjusting to the idea of me becoming part of her family, or so I thought. We started the reception, and everything was going smoothly. But then Jacqueline stood up to say a few words. I wasn't sure if she had planned this speech or if she was just trying to add her 2 cents. "Good evening, everyone," she started, her voice carrying across the room. "I just want to say how happy I am for Mark and Sarah, such a beautiful couple, but I have to admit I'm a little surprised by Sarah's choice of dress." The room went quiet. I could feel all eyes on me. I looked to Mark for reassurance, but his face had already shifted, a flicker of tension in his eyes. Jacqueline continued, "You see, when I thought about my son's wedding, I imagined something grand. I thought Sarah would have picked something a little more befitting of such a special day." She looked directly at me now, her smile thin and condescending. "I mean, $149 for a wedding dress." My stomach dropped. The room became uncomfortable, filled with an awkward silence. I didn't know what to say. I felt exposed, vulnerable, humiliated. "Excuse me." I tried to laugh it off, hoping it would ease the tension. "I'm sure it's not that bad." But Jacqueline didn't back down. "I mean, it's not about the cost," she said, still in that tone that made my skin crawl. "It's just, don't you think you should have spent a little more on a wedding dress? It's such a once-in-a-lifetime occasion." I wanted to say something, anything, to defend myself, but it felt like my voice was stolen from me. I managed to look at Mark, who was standing beside me. He looked uncomfortable, his hand resting awkwardly on my shoulder as if to comfort me, but it didn't feel like enough. "Mom, stop," Mark finally said, his voice tight. "You're being way too harsh." But Jacqueline wasn't finished. "It's just the truth, Mark. I'm sorry, but Sarah's dress is a little underwhelming." It was then that Jacqueline did something I will never forget. She reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. She opened it slowly, like she was performing some kind of grand reveal, and took out a receipt. My blood ran cold as she waved it in the air for everyone to see. "Here it is," she said, with that same cruel smile. "The receipt for this dress, a little over $149. I just had to look into it. For a wedding dress, that's shockingly cheap." I felt my face go pale as I tried to process what she was doing. The entire room was watching, and I felt so exposed. But before I could even think of how to respond, I heard a quiet whisper from behind me. "She swapped it." I turned slowly, my mind still spinning. Veronica, Mark's sister, was standing there, her eyes wide with a mix of anger and sympathy. She leaned in closer, speaking just loud enough for me to hear. "She swapped the dress you actually bought with this one." I froze. Everything stopped making sense at that moment. Veronica's words echoed in my head. She swapped the dress. The dress I had carefully picked out, the one I had tried on so many times and felt beautiful in, was gone. In its place was a cheap imitation, one that Jacqueline had replaced it with without me even knowing. She had stolen my wedding dress. I felt sick to my stomach as I pieced everything together. The day I had brought the dress over to Jacqueline's house for alterations, she had insisted I let her handle the final adjustments. She told me she had someone who could help make it perfect. I had trusted her. I had trusted that she was helping me. But no, Jacqueline had secretly swapped my dress with a cheap version. She had sabotaged my wedding, and I hadn't even realized it until now. Mark turned to face his mother, his face red with fury. "Mom, what the hell is wrong with you?" Jacqueline didn't even flinch. She just stood there, her cold expression never wavering. "I only wanted what was best for Mark," she said in her smooth, patronizing voice. "I just didn't think this was good enough." The room was silent. I couldn't even bring myself to speak. The weight of the situation was overwhelming, and I felt like I was drowning in it. But it was Mark who stood up to his mother. For the first time in his life, he demanded the truth. He demanded to know why she had done this to me. Why she had tried to ruin my day, our day, just because she didn't think I was worthy of her son. It didn't take long for the truth to come spilling out. Jacqueline admitted to swapping the dress, though she tried to justify it by saying she wanted better for me. She said I deserved something more extravagant, something that reflected the importance of the event. I didn't care about her justification. I didn't care about anything anymore. She had broken my trust, and I couldn't unsee the cruelty in her actions. The reception went downhill from there. The guests had lost their excitement, and many of them left early, unsure of what to do with the tension that hung in the air. Mark and I tried to salvage the evening, but it felt impossible. My mother-in-law had poisoned our wedding, and there was no way to undo that damage. As we left the venue that night, Mark held my hand tightly, but we were both shaken. I could see in his eyes that he was angry, hurt, and heartbroken by his mother's actions. He promised me that we would never let her control our lives again. But in the back of my mind, I couldn't help but wonder if things would ever be the same. Would I ever be able to forgive her for what she did? Would I ever trust her again? For now, I just need some space. From the family. From the pain. The days following the wedding felt like a blur. Mark and I didn't speak to his mother for a week after the reception. I tried to reach out to him, but every time I looked at him, I saw the anger in his eyes. It wasn't directed at me, but it was as if he couldn't quite process what had happened either. I could see the conflict in him. On one hand, his loyalty was to me, but on the other, he was torn by years of his mother's influence and control over his life. Mark and I talked late into the nights, after everything had calmed down. He asked me if I thought his mother would ever change. I didn't have an answer. I wanted to believe that people could change, that maybe, with time, Jacqueline would realize how toxic her actions were. But deep down, I knew it wasn't that simple. She had always been like this, controlling, manipulative, and dismissive of anyone who didn't meet her standards. In the midst of all this, I couldn't help but feel humiliated. At first, I had justified the dress swap as a simple mistake. Maybe she thought she was helping. But as the days passed, I realized that what Jacqueline had done was calculated, and it was designed to make me feel small. She had taken something as personal and meaningful as my wedding dress and turned it into a public spectacle. The betrayal didn't just sting, it cut deep. I spent hours going over the events in my head, replaying the moment she pulled out that receipt and waved it around like some kind of trophy. She didn't care that she had embarrassed me in front of everyone. It was as though the humiliation was the point, as if she wanted to prove that I wasn't good enough, that I didn't belong in her world or in her son's life. There was a part of me that wanted to reach out to my family for support, but I hesitated. I didn't want to burden anyone with the drama, and honestly, I was afraid that they might tell me I was overreacting, that it wasn't a big deal. But deep down, I knew I couldn't let this go. I also started to notice that Mark wasn't the same with me after the wedding. At first, I thought he was just processing everything, but the more time passed, the more I realized that it wasn't just his mother's actions that were bothering him, it was mine too. I couldn't ignore the fact that my relationship with his family had taken a hit, and it was all thanks to Jacqueline. But I also started to feel this creeping sense of guilt. Had I been too harsh? Had I pushed Mark to choose between me and his family? I didn't want that for him. I didn't want to be the reason he was caught between two worlds. I decided to reach out to his sister, Veronica. Maybe she could offer some insight into how things had gotten so bad. It wasn't easy to do, but I couldn't stay silent forever. When she finally agreed to meet up, I was a little apprehensive, but I had to know where her head was at. I didn't know what I expected from her. But the moment we sat down, I could tell she was just as exhausted by the situation as I was. She had been quiet during the reception, only speaking to me in those brief moments of whispered words. But now, in the quiet of a small cafe, I could see her frustration. "I'm sorry about everything, Sarah," she said, her voice quiet but genuine. "You don't deserve that, and neither does Mark." I was caught off guard by her apology. Veronica had always seemed so perfect, so in line with her mother's expectations. I never imagined her feeling this way about Jacqueline. I had assumed she was just as much of a part of the problem. "Why didn't you say something sooner?" I asked, my voice shaking with a mixture of anger and confusion. "Why didn't you stop her at the wedding?" She sighed, running a hand through her hair. "Because I've been dealing with it for years. I've seen Mom do worse, and I've kept my mouth shut. I don't know why, but I guess I just never thought you'd experience it like I did. I thought you'd be stronger, or maybe I thought you'd handle it better. I never expected it to go this far." I didn't know what to say. I could feel the weight of her words hanging in the air. She wasn't just apologizing for what happened. She was apologizing for her silence, for allowing me to walk into a minefield without warning. "I didn't know about the dress swap until after the wedding," Veronica added, her eyes downcast. "When I saw you, I knew something was off, and then I found out what Mom had done." I sat there, trying to process everything. Veronica's role in this wasn't as innocent as I had assumed. But at the same time, I realized that she wasn't the mastermind behind this. It wasn't her fault that her mother had orchestrated this elaborate sabotage. "I don't know what to do anymore," I confessed, my voice breaking. "I feel like I'm losing Mark and I'm losing myself in the process. And his family, they're all so toxic. I can't just keep pretending like everything's fine, but I don't know how to make it stop." Veronica reached across the table, her hand gently touching mine. "I get it, Sarah, I really do. But don't give up on Mark just yet. He loves you. And right now, I think he just needs some time to process everything. He's always been torn between Mom and me, but he's never been forced to choose like this before. It's hard for him." Her words gave me a little comfort, but the weight of the situation still felt suffocating. The truth was, I didn't know where Mark and I stood anymore. We hadn't spoken in days, and when we did, it was always about the wedding fiasco, never about us. He was angry, and so was I, but the last thing I wanted was for this to tear us apart. That night, I sat on the edge of the bed, my phone in hand, unsure of whether or not I should reach out to him. The silence between us had been loud and uncomfortable. Every time I looked at him, I saw a man torn between his family and his wife. It wasn't just about the dress anymore. It was about the bigger picture. It was about whether or not we could move past this betrayal, about whether or not we could create a life together without his family constantly tearing us down. I took a deep breath and sent him a text. "I don't want to lose you over this, Mark, but I can't keep pretending like I'm okay when I'm not. I need to talk to you." I didn't know what his response would be. I didn't know if he'd even respond. But at that point, I was out of options. The only thing I could do was be honest. The hours that passed after I sent the text felt like days. I had no idea what to expect. Was he angry? Was he just as hurt as I was, but too proud to admit it? Or worse, had he already decided that it was easier to stay silent than face the conflict? I kept checking my phone, hoping for a response, but nothing came. The silence was suffocating. Around midnight, I finally fell asleep, exhausted from all the thoughts and emotions swirling in my head. But I woke up to the faint buzzing of my phone on the bedside table. My heart skipped a beat as I grabbed it, hoping to see a message from Mark. It was him. "Can we talk tomorrow?" It read, just those 5 words. I stared at the screen for a while, trying to interpret what they meant. Was he asking for space, or was he ready to finally confront the issue head-on? I quickly typed back, "Of course. When and where?" A few moments later, he responded, "Morning. Coffee at our usual place?" I felt a mix of relief and anxiety wash over me. At least he wanted to talk. But I knew that what we were about to face wasn't going to be easy. This wasn't just about a dress anymore. This was about the cracks in our relationship that had started showing in the wake of the wedding and his mother's actions. I needed to figure out if we were going to survive this, or if it was going to be the beginning of the end. The next morning, I met Mark at the small cafe we used to frequent when we were dating. It was quiet, warm, and familiar, exactly the kind of place where we could have a conversation without distractions. But nothing felt the same. The tension in the air was palpable, and we both avoided eye contact for a few seconds before Mark spoke first. "I know you want to talk about last night," he said, his voice low. "But I need to say something before we go any further." I nodded, bracing myself. I could feel the heaviness in his words before he even spoke them. "Sarah," he started, running a hand through his hair, "I don't know what to say. I've never felt so lost. I hate what my mom did to you. I hate that I couldn't stop it. But I feel like I'm caught in the middle here. I don't want to lose you, but I don't know how to fix this." I could see the pain in his eyes, and I knew it wasn't just about his mother. It was about the guilt he was carrying, the weight of not being able to protect me from the woman who was supposed to accept me as part of the family. "You don't have to fix it," I said softly, finally meeting his gaze. "I just need to know that you're with me on this. I can't do it alone. But if you keep letting her control everything, then I don't know how we're going to make it." There was a long pause. I could tell he was processing my words, but I could also feel the walls he had built up around himself in the last few days. He was retreating, and I was desperately trying to pull him back. "I want to be with you, Sarah," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "But she's my mom. She's always been there for me, even when I didn't deserve it. I've spent my whole life trying to make her proud, and now I feel like I've failed her too. I don't know how to balance all of this." I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the conversation settle over me. This wasn't just about her attacking me anymore. It was about the relationship he had with his mother, the guilt he felt for not standing up to her sooner. And now it is affecting us. "Mark," I said, my voice steady despite the chaos I felt inside, "I get that you love her, but she's hurting us. She doesn't get to dictate our lives anymore. I want to build a future with you, but I can't do it while we're still stuck in this toxic cycle with her. If we don't set boundaries, if you don't start standing up to her, I don't know where we're going. And I'm scared." He leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly as he processed my words. The silence between us stretched on, but it was a different kind of silence, one filled with realization. Slowly, he nodded. "You're right," he said quietly. "I've been too afraid to really confront her. But I've been putting you in the middle of this, and that's not fair to you. I promise I'll talk to her. I'll set the boundaries we need, and I'll do it for us. For our marriage." I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. It wasn't everything, but it was a start. A promise that we could begin healing from this, that I wasn't in this alone anymore. And maybe, just maybe, we could begin to rebuild the trust that had been shattered. But even as I felt a small sense of relief, I knew that the road ahead wouldn't be easy. The real test would come when Mark had to face his mother and tell her that he wouldn't let her dictate our lives any longer. I had no idea how Jacqueline would react, but I could already guess it wouldn't be pretty. She wasn't the type to back down without a fight. "I'm glad you're on my side," I said, squeezing his hand across the table. "I'm not going to lie, Mark. I'm still hurt by what she did, but I need you to stand by me. I need you to put us first." He looked at me, his eyes filled with determination. "You and me, Sarah, that's all that matters now." The next few days were a whirlwind of emotions. Mark and I spent time together, trying to reconnect, but I could feel the tension between us every time his mother came up in conversation. It wasn't something I could ignore. The thought of her still looming over us, still controlling parts of our lives, made it hard to feel completely at peace. I wasn't the kind of person to sit back and wait for things to fix themselves. I needed to confront the situation head-on. So, after some discussion with Mark, I decided it was time to meet with Jacqueline. I knew it wouldn't be easy, and I wasn't sure what would happen, but I couldn't continue living in the shadow of her manipulation. When I called her, I could hear the surprise in her voice. She hadn't expected me to reach out. "What's this about, Sarah?" she asked, her tone tight, as if she was already on the defensive. "I want to meet with you," I said, my voice steady but firm. "I need to talk to you about what happened at the wedding, and about everything else that's been going on." There was a long pause before she finally responded. "Fine, we'll meet. But I won't have my son dragged into this. I hope you know that." I had no idea what to expect from our meeting, but I knew one thing. It was time to stop hiding, to stop letting her tear us apart. I wasn't going to back down anymore. The day we met came, and I sat in a small cafe, waiting for Jacqueline to show up. I felt the same kind of anxiety I had the first time I'd met her, all those months ago. But this time was different. This time, I wasn't the quiet, unsure woman hoping for approval. I was someone who had been hurt, betrayed, and needed to stand up for herself and her marriage. When Jacqueline walked in, she was as poised as ever, but there was a coldness to her that I hadn't seen before. She sat down without a word, folding her hands neatly on the table, and waited for me to speak. I took a deep breath. This was it, the conversation that could change everything. As Jacqueline sat down across from me, I could feel the tension in my shoulders, the anticipation in the air, but this time I wasn't going to let her control the conversation. I wasn't going to let her get away with what she had done, or any of the other ways she had undermined me. Jacqueline, I began, my voice steady, I've been thinking a lot about everything that happened at the wedding, and I'm sure you know by now that it was more than just a dress. It wasn't just about the money or the way you shamed me in front of everyone. It was about the fact that you undermined me, on my wedding day. You tried to make me feel small, and you succeeded. Her lips tightened, but she didn't interrupt. I could see the frustration simmering beneath her calm exterior, but she was holding it in. Good. She could hold it in. This was my moment, not hers. I've been holding back for a long time, trying to play nice, trying to fit into your perfect world, I continued. But I can't anymore. I can't just sit here and pretend like I'm okay with the way you've treated me and the way you've treated Mark. I can't pretend like I'm okay with the way you've controlled everything about his life, and now, our life. You have no respect for me, for my choices, and for our marriage. Jacqueline's face tightened at the mention of Mark, but she remained silent. I could see her trying to gather her composure, but I wasn't done yet. I don't expect you to understand, I said, my voice growing colder. But what you did with my wedding dress, switching it out like I wouldn't notice, that was the last straw. I was willing to let a lot of things go. But that's unforgivable. You didn't just rob me of something sentimental, you made a public spectacle of me, and I won't stand for it, not anymore. Her eyes flickered for a second, a brief moment of uncertainty. But then she quickly regained her composure and opened her mouth to say something. But I raised my hand, cutting her off. I don't want to hear your excuses, Jacqueline. I know what you did, and I know why you did it. You didn't want me to look good. You didn't want me to feel worthy of your son, and you certainly didn't want me to feel like I fit in with your perfect image of your family. But the truth is, I'm done playing along. I'm done caring about your approval. I've had enough. For a long moment, there was silence between us. I could hear the ticking of the clock on the wall, the low murmur of people in the background. The world around us seemed to fade away, and it was just the two of us, locked in this confrontation. Finally, Jacqueline spoke, her voice low and clipped. You think you can just walk into this family and make demands. You think Mark will choose you over his own mother. I met her gaze steadily, unflinching. If Mark ever truly had to choose between you and me, you'd lose, Jacqueline. And deep down, you know it. Her face darkened, but I could tell she was starting to unravel. It wasn't just the words, it was the confidence in my voice, the resolve I had now. I was no longer the woman who let her manipulate me. I was someone who had seen through the facade, and I wasn't afraid to call her out on it. I don't care if you approve of me or not, I continued, but you are not going to destroy my marriage. I will not allow it. And if that means cutting you out of our lives, then so be it. Jacqueline's gaze flickered, and for the first time I saw a crack in her armor. She opened her mouth to say something, but before she could, I leaned in, my voice low but firm. You think I don't know everything, Jacqueline? I know about the dress swap. I know you've done worse to other people in this family, and I know how you've always tried to control Mark. But what you don't understand is that you can't control me. I'm not afraid of you, and I'm not going to let you hurt the man I love anymore. Jacqueline's eyes flashed with anger, but I could see the faintest hint of doubt creeping in. She knew that I was serious. She knew I wasn't going to back down. The conversation shifted after that, the energy in the room growing colder as I made it clear that if she wanted a relationship with Mark and me, it would have to be on our terms. She would no longer have the power to control every aspect of our lives. The final blow came when I slid a small envelope across the table toward her. You might have thought you could embarrass me with that receipt at the wedding, but I'm not the one who needs to be ashamed. Take a look at this. She picked up the envelope and opened it, her eyes narrowing as she unfolded the piece of paper inside. It was a receipt for the original dress, the one she had swapped out, and attached was a letter from the boutique I had purchased it from, confirming the alteration requests and the price of the dress. I had kept it as a safeguard, knowing that if she ever tried to pull anything like this again, I would have proof. "I'm not going to let you keep playing games, Jacqueline," I said quietly. "You might have thought you could get away with this, but I'm not the one who's been dishonest here." For a moment, she just stared at the receipt, her expression flickering between shock and something else, something that looked almost like fear. And then, for the first time in the entire conversation, Jacqueline did something I wasn't expecting. She looked away. She didn't say anything more. She didn't try to defend herself. She just stared at the table in front of her, silent. I took a deep breath. I could feel a weight lifting from my shoulders, a sense of release that I hadn't known I needed. "Goodbye, Jacqueline," I said softly, standing up from the table. "This conversation is over. And as for your role in our lives, well, it's up to you. But know this, I won't allow you to destroy our family anymore." I didn't wait for her response. I turned and walked out of the cafe, leaving her sitting there with her thoughts. She could stay in her world of manipulation and control, or she could make the choice to change. But either way, I wasn't going to let her take me down with her. The next few weeks were a mixture of relief and tension. Mark and I had worked through our issues, and I could see the shift in him. He was finally starting to see things for what they were, the unhealthy patterns, the emotional manipulation, and the way his mother had always been at the center of it all. He had started to set boundaries with her, though it wasn't easy. But every time he stood up for me, I felt more confident in our future. As for Jacqueline, she didn't try to make contact for a while. I knew it wasn't over, but I had the satisfaction of knowing that I had taken back control of my life. I had stood up for myself, and I had made it clear that I wasn't going to let her win. Eventually, Jacqueline reached out to Mark, her attempt to rebuild some semblance of a relationship. But this time, things were different. Mark didn't cave. He set his boundaries. He made it clear that if she wanted to have a relationship with us, she would need to respect us. And slowly, over time, things started to change. Jacqueline never fully gave up her need for control, but she learned that she couldn't control us anymore. Mark and I moved forward, stronger than before. And as for Jacqueline, she slowly learned the consequences of her actions. She wasn't welcome to dictate our lives anymore, and that, in itself, felt like victory. In the end, the only thing I needed to prove was that I wasn't a passive participant in my own life. I wasn't going to be the victim anymore. And as Mark and I built our life together, I knew that the woman I had become would never be silenced again.